Executive functions and ADHD, what exactly are they? When I first heard the term executive function, I thought about people in business suits in the C-suite. That's right, that's what I was thinking. But that was entirely wrong. And in today's video, I want to explain to you what executive functions are in plain language so that you understand exactly what executive functions are and how they relate to ADHD. Because I promise you, if you begin to understand this, you will understand ADHD so much better. Let's dive right in. So before we dive in, let me just quickly introduce myself. My name is Matt. I'm a therapist in private practice. I own a practice in New York City, and we specialize in the treatment of ADHD. We are very passionate about educating people on ADHD, and as a result, we're making this video about executive functions. If you want to know more about our practice, there's a link down below. The practice is called Progress Therapy, stylized as PRGRS, but that's not what this video is about. Let's dive right in. So let's actually start with what executive functions are. Dr. Russell Barkley, a leading researcher in the field, says that there are a ton of different definitions, but he boils it down to this. Executive functions are the mental abilities you need to work towards goals. He then goes on to describe 7 internal executive functions that help us achieve goals and 5 external executive functions. There are some overlap here, but let's go through what they are. Let's start with the internal executive functions. The first is self-awareness, the ability to direct your attention inward to observe yourself. The second is inhibition, or in other words, self-restraint, stopping your immediate reactions so you have time to think before acting. Third, nonverbal working memory, being able to hold visual pictures and mental maps in your mind to guide yourself. Fourth, verbal working memory, your internal mind's voice that you use to talk to yourself, give yourself instructions, and problem solve. I'm sure we all can relate to that. Number 5, emotional self-regulation, managing, soothing, and moderating your feelings. Number 6, self-motivation, generating your own internal drive to finish tasks without needing outside rewards. And number 7, planning and problem solving, mentally playing with information and ideas in your head to find new ways around obstacles. And now the 5 external executive functions. The first one, self-restraint, managing your impulses and your actions. Number 2, time management, monitoring yourself relative to the passage of time and deadlines. Number 3, self-organization and problem solving, arranging your environment to be efficient and adapting when things don't go as planned. Number 4, emotional self-regulation, managing your moods and not exploding like a quote-unquote firecracker at daily events or things that happen in your environment. And number 5, self-motivation, activating yourself to start and stick with tasks until they are finished. And the difference between the internal and external executive functions is that the internal ones are the things that people can't really observe, right? So your inhibition or self-restraint, people aren't going to see you doing that. It's going to happen internally. Or for example, the external, something like self-organization and problem solving. People might see the way you arrange your environment to help you achieve your goals. And I really like the metaphor Dr. Barkley uses. He says that your executive functions are like a Swiss Army knife of different skills that you can deploy to help you achieve your different goals. So for example, if you're in a loud restaurant and you're having an important meeting with someone there, you can use inhibition to block out the other noises around you and focus your attention on the conversation at hand. Or another example, the planning and problem solving executive functions. If you get an email from your boss presenting a brand new problem to you, and you start to quietly think about the different ways you can solve that problem. Maybe you're going to call this person or you're going to work on this report, but it all happens internally. You're playing with those thoughts and ideas in your mind in order to solve a new problem at hand and to achieve your goals. And just to summarize the simple definition one more time, the executive functions are a set of skills that we have to help us work towards goals. So then the question is, how does this all relate to ADHD? Well, it's important to know that ADHD is not just related loosely to executive functions, but rather ADHD is a developmental disorder of executive functioning. In other words, people with ADHD experience pervasive executive dysfunction across many domains of their life. ADHD is a disorder of executive functioning. ADHD directly impacts the internal and external executive functions that we mentioned earlier. Now, one of the subtypes of ADHD is this hyperactive type. And if you look at those symptoms, they're actually deficits in inhibition. Let me give you a couple of examples. One of the criteria is, quote, often blurts out an answer before a question has been completed. Simple enough, this is an issue with inhibition. And if you read through the DSM criteria for ADHD, both of the subtypes, hyperactive and inattentive, you will notice that almost all of the criteria are describing different executive functions or deficits in those executive functions. So it's obviously not just a simple link or ADHD is loosely related to executive functions. ADHD is a disorder of the executive functions. And so now we have to finally ask the question, well, if I'm dealing with ADHD and my executive functions are impaired, what do I do about it? Now, there is some research out there about strengthening executive function skills, but today I wanted to share with you something that we help our clients think about all the time. And this is the concept of externalizing executive functions. Now, we are proponents of strengthening and skill building around executive functions, but we also at the same time want our clients to think about how they can externalize the executive functions. And this pays off big time. Now, let me just give you a couple of simple examples. Let's say that we struggle with memory, right? This is one of our executive functions. Instead of trying to strengthen our memory, well, we can do that at the same time. But instead of spending all of our effort on remembering better or doing better with our memory, we can actually figure out a system to externalize that memory. Maybe it's a notepad on your phone. Maybe it's a whole bunch of sticky notes. Another example of this would be for context switching. So some people have a real difficult time stopping one task and starting another. So rather than just trying to get better at that, what we can do is set an alarm, put it in another room before we start our first task, and we time it so that it ends when we want to, right? Not when we feel like it, but when we need to or want to end. And then when that alarm goes off and it's all the way in another room, you then have to get up, you create space, right? So you can then switch to another task. And in that sense, you're externalizing the executive function. And this works really well. Now, let me reiterate it one more time. We do encourage strengthening and skill building around executive functions. And at the same time, we do want people to think about externalizing executive functions. When this combination happens, people tend to do very, very well. And so there you have it. That is executive functions and ADHD explained in plain language. I hope you learned something from this video. I hope you found it helpful. And until next time, I will see you in the next video.